The first clump of dirt had barely hit Ruth's casket when my phone buzzed with a picture of my son raising a champagne flute beside his wife's birthday cake. My hand tightened so hard around the umbrella handle that the metal bent against my palm. I felt something click in my jaw. Not grief, not exactly. Something colder, something final. Before dawn, I changed every lock in my house. I honestly thought that would be the last ugly thing I'd have to do after burying my wife of 41 years without my only son beside me. I was wrong. Because 3 days later, Eric showed up at my door in a navy wool coat, carrying banana bread from an expensive bakery, and a folder of documents he wanted me to sign for my own protection. By then, I had already found the missing brass key, the retirement home brochure hidden in Ruth's sewing box, and 1 page of paperwork he was never supposed to leave behind. If you've ever confused blood with loyalty, stay with me. And if this story hits something raw, subscribe. Because I didn't lose my wife and then nearly lose my home by accident. Someone had already started arranging that second funeral for me while the first one was still being planned. The first crack came 9 days before Ruth died. She was in the hospice bed we'd set up in the den because she wanted to look out at the maple tree in the backyard, the one Eric climbed when he was little, and split his chin open on the bird bath. The room smelled like linen spray, lemon hand cream, and the sharp medicinal sweetness of oxygen tubing. Ruth had one of those blankets over her knees that volunteers sew for hospice patients. Blue squares, crooked stitching, soft from too many washes. She was asleep when Eric arrived, tapping rain off his loafers on the back mat like he was stepping into a client meeting instead of his mother's last week on Earth. He kissed her forehead, told her she looked good, which was a lie so thin it made me tired, then followed me into the kitchen. "Dad," he said quietly, glancing toward the den, "have you and Mom updated everything? Deed, accounts, all that? You know how messy probate can get." At the time, I told myself he was being practical. That was one of my greatest talents where Eric was concerned. I could repaint a red flag beige in under 10 seconds. I said, "Nora handled the wills years ago. Everything's where it belongs." He nodded, but his eyes didn't stay on my face. They moved to the little porcelain dish by the back door where we kept the spare brass key, then to the roll-top desk in the dining room, then to the hallway closet. A quick, professional sweep. I noticed it because I used to build cabinets for a living, and men who appraise rooms with their eyes always stand the same way, weight slightly forward, like they're measuring not just what's there, but how easily it can be moved. Then he said something that sat wrong with me all night. "You should probably simplify things," he said. "This house is a lot for one person." "Not for one person," I almost told him. "For me, for your father, for the man who put the crown molding in with his own hands while your mother held the ladder steady." But Ruth coughed from the den. That dry, tearing cough cancer had carved into her, and the moment passed. That should have been the part that warned me. It wasn't. The next morning, I reached into the porcelain dish for the spare key because the side gate had swollen in the rain and I needed the other one for the shed. The dish held coins, a dead battery, 2 grocery store rewards tags, and nothing else. The brass key was gone. I stood there longer than I should have, looking into that shallow white dish, as if a key might appear if I stared hard enough. Ruth and I had kept it there for 26 years. Same place, same key. Eric knew it. Everyone in the family knew it. When I asked Ruth whether she'd moved it, her eyelids fluttered open. Even dying, her eyes stayed sharp, hazel, clear, annoyingly honest. "No," she whispered. "Why?" "Spare keys missing." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Tom." Just my name, but the way she said it made me come closer. "If anything feels rushed after I'm gone," she said, breathing shallowly between words, "don't sign it on the spot." I tried to smile. Who said anything about signing? She gave me the look she'd given me for 4 decades, whenever I was pretending not to understand something, because understanding it would hurt. "Eric loves us," she said softly, "but he's been living inside her weather a long time." Her, Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, had the kind of beauty that arrived before she did. Glass-smooth dark hair, expensive coats, that measured laugh some women learn when they've decided charm is better than warmth. She was never openly rude to Ruth. That would have been easier. Vanessa specialized in nicer forms of contempt. She called our house quaint, the way other people say obsolete. She once stood in my kitchen, beneath the copper pans Ruth polished every Christmas, and said, "I just can't imagine raising kids without a proper mudroom." Ruth laughed it off later. "She needs every room in a magazine," she told me while drying dishes. "Some people can't rest unless they're performing." But I remembered everything. I remembered Vanessa asking, at our 40th anniversary dinner, whether we had an estate strategy. I remembered her looking at our backyard, not like a place where her husband learned to throw a baseball, but like a rectangular lot with resale potential. I remembered Eric slowly changing around her, not into a monster overnight, but into something worse and more believable, a man who kept trading pieces of his own conscience for easier days at home. And we had helped them. God, how we had helped them. When Eric and Vanessa overbought that brick colonial in Westfield, Ruth and I covered part of the down payment from money we had set aside for travel. I spent 3 months finishing their basement after my regular jobs, sanding trim until midnight. When Vanessa's event business nearly folded during the pandemic, Ruth sold her mother's diamond brooch and never told Eric where the money came from. We paid their property taxes 1 year when Eric's bonus got delayed. We took the children every weekend for 6 straight months when Vanessa was under pressure. We did it gladly, or at least I thought we did. That's the ugly part about being useful to people who feel entitled to you. It can look a lot like love from the inside. 3 days later, I found the brochure. It happened because Ruth asked for her green sewing box, the old metal one with chipped paint on the corners and a loose handle wrapped in floral tape. She kept thread, spare buttons, hem tape, and things she didn't want lying around in plain sight. Gift cards, receipts, notes from church friends. Once I found Eric's first grade drawing in there, folded into a square no bigger than a playing card. She was asleep again when I brought it to her, so I set it on the coffee table. Hours later, after the nurse left and the house was quiet except for the oxygen machine, I opened it to find nail scissors. The first thing I saw was a glossy brochure from Hawthorne Glen Senior Living. Cream-colored cover, a silver-haired couple on a porch swing, smiling too hard. I actually frowned at it, as if it had wandered in from the wrong house. Under it was a business card for a woman named Denise Carr, family transition consultant. And beneath that was a yellow sticky note in Vanessa's handwriting. I knew her handwriting because she wrote those long Christmas place cards like she was signing legal documents. Call after service. Ask about temporary placement. He shouldn't be alone in that house. I read it twice. Then, a third time. For a few seconds, nothing in my body moved. My hearing narrowed until all I could make out was the small, electric hiss of Ruth's oxygen line and the ticking of the kitchen clock. When I looked over at my wife, she was awake. She didn't look surprised to see the brochure in my hand. She looked tired. "I found that in Eric's car last week," she said. "Must have tucked it away." My mouth went dry. "You thought they were planning to put me in a facility?" She closed her eyes. "I thought maybe Vanessa suggested it, and Eric didn't shut it down fast enough." That sentence broke my heart in a different way than cancer had. Even then, Ruth was trying to leave him somewhere to stand. I wanted to storm outside, call him, demand answers. Instead, I sat down beside her and held her hand. Her skin was paper-thin and warm, her wedding ring loose on a finger that used to knead bread and button children into winter coats. "Maybe it's nothing," I said. She opened one eye. "Tom, don't insult both of us." I laughed once, and then I cried with my face turned away from her because I couldn't bear being watched while I came apart. But that still wasn't the moment I truly saw my son. That came on the day we buried her. Ruth died on a Thursday just after 4 in the morning. It was still dark. The coffee maker timer clicked on in the kitchen 10 minutes later because she had set it the week before, and I hadn't thought to change it. That small, ordinary sound nearly dropped me to my knees. The next days moved in stiff pieces. Funeral home, church calls, flowers, her navy dress laid out on the bed. I chose the pearl earrings Eric gave her when he got his first real bonus, because she had cried when she opened them. He remembered, she'd whispered to me in the kitchen afterward, as if she still needed proof that our son was reachable through all the polish life had put on him. The service was set for Tuesday at 11. Small church, then graveside, then sandwiches and coffee in the fellowship hall. Exactly what Ruth wanted, no fuss. She always said grief shouldn't have to valet park. On Sunday night, Eric called. I knew from his pause before speaking that something rotten was coming. "Dad," he said, "I need to talk to you about Tuesday." I sat at the kitchen table with Ruth's memorial cards spread in front of me. "What about Tuesday?" He exhaled. "Vanessa's 40th is Tuesday night. You know that." I waited. "We've had this venue booked for months," he said. "People are flying in. Her sister already paid the final balance. The kids are part of it. There's just a lot tied up in it." The room seemed to tilt slightly. Not enough to make me dizzy. Enough to make me understand. "You're telling me," I said slowly, "that your mother's funeral conflicts with your wife's birthday party. It's not just a party." "No, of course not. Silly me. Dead mothers are casual. Candlelit rooftop events are logistical." He rushed on. "We can maybe come after the burial? Or I can send the family to the dinner and stop by the church for part of it. I'm trying to make this work." I looked across the table at the empty chair where Ruth used to sit and clip coupons she didn't need because she enjoyed beating stores at their own game. "Your mother is being lowered into the ground one time. Eric?" Silence. Then he said the sentence that stripped something permanent out of me. "She wouldn't want us to ruin this for Vanessa." I can still hear how reasonable he sounded. That's what made it obscene. If he had shouted, I might have mistaken it for stress. But he sounded composed. Defensive, but composed. Like a man explaining scheduling pressure to a colleague. I said, "Your mother spent 6 weeks dying, Dad?" "No," I said. "You don't get to dad me from behind a reservation." He went quiet again. Then he lowered his voice. "You are not being fair." That almost made me laugh. Not fair? Ruth missed birthdays, anniversaries, holidays, sleep, comfort, pride, and, eventually, her own pain medication schedule because she kept trying to stay lucid whenever you dropped by. She wanted to hear your voice clearly. She saved enough strength to ask about your children. She defended you when I saw you fading away from us in real time. And now I'm the one being unfair because death inconvenienced a party planner? I didn't say all of that. I should have. Instead I said, "Do what you can live with." Then I hung up, because if I kept listening to my son weigh his mother against a dessert menu, I was going to say something neither of us could bury. Tuesday came cold and hard. Wet wind, low gray clouds. The kind of late winter morning that makes Churchstone look cruel. Eric did not come to the church. He did not come to the cemetery. He sent white roses with a card that said, "Thinking of you today." Vanessa's handwriting, not even his. At the graveside, my sister Joan stood under a black umbrella on one side of me, and Ruth's friend Marlene stood on the other. The pastor's words dissolved in the wind. When they began lowering the casket, I felt the world narrow to the scrape of ropes and the thud of damp dirt. That was when my phone vibrated in my coat pocket. I would have ignored it. I should have ignored it. But grief makes you superstitious. Every vibration feels like news from the dead. It was a group text. Not from Eric. From my granddaughter Sophie, who was 14 and too young to understand how these things travel. A photo. Vanessa in a silver dress with candles blazing behind her. Eric beside her, smiling the smile I paid for with braces in 9th grade. The caption read, "Mom's birthday dinner. Love you." I stared at that picture until the umbrella in my hand trembled. Marlene touched my sleeve. "Tom?" I put the phone away and watched the last of the dirt hit the wood. I didn't cry there. Grief had already done its work. What I felt was a clean kind of breakage, the kind that leaves edges. That night, I came home to a house so still, I could hear the refrigerator motor kick on from the back hallway. Ruth's slippers were still beside the sofa. Her reading glasses were on the armrest with one temple bent slightly outward. A casserole dish someone from church had dropped off sat on the counter, still warm at the center. Everything looked paused, like she might come back in and apologize for making me worry. Instead, at 8:14 p.m., Eric sent a voice message. "Dad, I know today was emotional. I'm sorry we couldn't make it work. I'll come by Thursday, okay? There are a few things we should probably handle sooner rather than later. Mostly just house stuff. Love you." House stuff. Not, "How are you sleeping?" Not, "Are you alone?" Not, "I failed you, and I know it." House stuff. I went straight to the hardware store the next morning when it opened and bought new deadbolts, window latches, and a reinforced strike plate for the back door. The young clerk asked if I needed help carrying anything to the truck. I said no, though my hands shook so badly I dropped the screws in the parking lot. By noon, the locks were changed. I thought that would make me feel safe. Instead, it made me feel like a man boarding up a church after someone had already stolen the silver. Thursday, right on time, Eric arrived. He brought banana bread in a white paper bag from that bakery Vanessa liked, the one with the French name on the awning and $5 muffins. He hugged me lightly, more air than body, and looked around the entryway long enough to notice the new lock. "You changed it," he said. "I did." He gave a small nod, as if I had confirmed a theory. Then he carried the bread into the kitchen and placed it on the counter like an offering at the wrong altar. He looked good. That made me angry too. Hair trimmed, coat pressed, watch gleaming. My wife had been in the ground for 48 hours and my son looked camera ready. We sat at the table. The folder stayed under his hand. He started with his apology. Late, clean, professionally phrased. "Dad, I know Tuesday hurt you. It hurt you. Not I hurt you," he went on. Vanessa had people in town and the whole evening was structured around them. The kids were already upset. It just became one of those impossible situations. I looked at him for so long, he finally shifted in his chair. "One of those," I repeated. He rubbed his mouth. "I'm not asking you to agree. I'm asking you not to make this worse than it already is." There it was again. That flattening language people use when they want to reduce your pain to an administrative issue. Then he slid the folder toward me. "What's this?" I asked. "Just some planning documents. Temporary power of attorney. A property management authorization. Nothing dramatic. If you get sick or if you just don't want to deal with the house, I can handle repairs, bills, the sale later if that's ever needed. It's really for your protection." I didn't touch the folder. He opened it himself and turned the first page toward me. Dense print, tabs, signature flags. I noticed 3 things at once. First, the law office listed on the draft was not Nora's. It was a firm I didn't know. Second, the words incapacity event appeared twice on page 1. Third, there was a second sheet halfway back with a header from Hawthorne Glen Senior Living. My pulse slowed instead of quickened. That's the strange thing about certain betrayals. Once they reach the size you feared, your body gives up on panic and settles into recognition. I said, very quietly, "Why is a retirement facility attached to paperwork about my house?" Eric blinked, just once. But it was enough. "It's not attached," he said. "That must have gotten mixed in." Dad, listen to me. No one is trying to do anything to you. We're trying to help you think ahead." "We?" I leaned back in my chair. "When were you going to bring up the brochure?" He stared at me. "I found it in Ruth's sewing box before she died." His face changed then, not into guilt, into calculation. "She saw it?" "Yes." He looked down at the table for a moment, then brought his eyes back up wearing a softer expression. One I now recognize as the face people make when they are deciding how little truth they can survive on. "Vanessa asked for information," he said. "That's all. You've been alone in this house a lot even before Mom passed. We worried. If something happened, fall, stroke, confusion." "Confusion," I repeated. He held my gaze. "Dad, I'm not insulting you." "No," I thought. "You're pre-filing me." I finally took the folder, not to sign it, but to feel its weight. That paper felt heavy in my hands, in a way documents only do when they're carrying someone else's plan for your life. Then one loose sheet slipped free and landed near my elbow. Eric reached for it, too late. It was a loan worksheet. Bridge financing. Estimated collateral event, sale of primary residence, 114 Crescent Lane. My address. Under projected use of funds, someone had typed business shortfall coverage, tax obligation, liquidity stabilization. I didn't look up right away. I read every line, the amount, the due date, the thin optimism of a plan built on someone else's walls. When I did raise my head, Eric had gone pale. "Whose shortfall?" I asked. He said, "Nothing." "Vanessa's business?" He inhaled. "Dad, give me that." I pulled the paper back. "How long," I asked, "have the two of you been discussing selling my house?" You're twisting this. No, I'm finally reading it. He stood up fast enough to knock his chair into the radiator. That was not supposed to be in there. I actually smiled then, but there was no humor in it. That may be the first honest thing said in this kitchen all week. He pressed both hands on the table and leaned toward me. His voice dropped. You are grieving. You are isolated. You are not thinking clearly. And that was the moment I stopped looking for my son inside the man standing in front of me. Because I heard concern before. I had heard fear, stress, selfishness, even cowardice. But this was different. This was positioning. This was a man trying to move me out of my own credibility so he could move me out of my own house. I stood up too. I buried your mother without you, I said. Do not try to bury me while I'm still breathing. His face went hard. You always do this, he said. You make everything moral so no one else is allowed to be practical. The sentence hit me almost harder than the funeral, not because it was new, because it explained so much of my life with him in one breath. To Eric, love had become whatever didn't inconvenience him. Duty was theater. Practicality was the costume greed wore to family dinners. He grabbed the folder and stuffed the papers back inside. Except for the loan sheet. I kept that in my hand. Fine, he said. Don't sign anything today. But you need help, and if you keep acting paranoid, people are going to start noticing. Then he picked up the bakery bag, realized how absurd it looked, set it back down, and left. I watched him walk down the front path, through the beveled glass panel Ruth had insisted we install in 1998, because she wanted a little light, even on bad days. The taillights disappeared at the corner. Only then did I sit back down. My legs felt weak, but my mind had never been clearer. I called Nora. Nora Feldman had done our wills 15 years earlier and updated them whenever tax law changed or family life did. She was in her early 60s, direct, unsentimental, and incapable of being charmed by polished nonsense. Ruth liked her because she never pretended ugly facts were prettier than they were. Nora came over that afternoon. She set her leather briefcase on my kitchen table, read the Hawthorne brochure, read the draft power of attorney, read the loan sheet, and then took off her glasses. Well, she said, your son is either catastrophically reckless, or he has already begun building a legal story around your incompetence. I appreciated the honesty so much, I nearly cried again. What can he do? I asked. If you sign nothing, less than he hopes. If he already has copied keys, access to records, or anyone willing to say you're declining, more than I like. Then she asked me a question I hadn't thought to ask myself. Has anything else gone missing? The answer arrived before I could speak. Ruth's red file. We kept all the essential documents in a red accordion folder in the roll-top desk. Deed, insurance policies, tax returns, marriage certificate, Ruth's life insurance, a photocopy of our wills. I had opened the desk twice since the funeral, but only for condolence envelopes and stamps. I hadn't checked the folder itself. It was still there, but when I opened it, the deed copy was gone. Not the original. We kept that in Nora's safe deposit box years ago after a basement pipe burst, but the house packet with parcel number, tax history, insurance summary, and survey map. The exact documents you'd want if you were planning to discuss sale value and financing. I sat very still. Nora did not. We do 3 things right now, she said. Title alert, account notification, and formal revocation of any implied authority. Also locks, cameras, and a written log of every contact. Locks are changed. Good, she said. Now we make sure that isn't the only thing. That evening, I started a notebook. Time, dates, calls, texts, anything said. It felt unnatural at first, as if I were taking minutes during the collapse of my own family. But by page 3 I understood what Ruth had meant in the den. Don't sign it on the spot. What she had really meant was, do not let love make you lazy in the presence of danger. The next week revealed the rest. First, my bank manager, an old customer from my cabinet days named Lyle, called to say someone had asked general questions about adding an authorized signer to my accounts. No changes had been made, but the inquiry came from a number connected to Eric's office. Then Marlene from church told me hesitantly that Vanessa had mentioned I was having a hard time cognitively and that they might transition me somewhere safer after the memorial period. Transition. Another one of those tidy words people use when they don't want to say relocate, remove, diminish. Then Sophie called me from the back seat of a car, whispering, "Grandpa, are you moving?" My chest tightened. "Who told you that?" Mom said, "Maybe after Easter, because the house is too much, and you get confused with bills." Confused with bills. I paid every bill in this house for 41 years, including the ones Eric forgot when he was 32, and too proud to admit he'd over-leveraged his life. I asked softly, "Do you think I'm confused?" "No," she said immediately. Then, lower, "Dad got mad because I asked why he missed Grandma's funeral." I closed my eyes. "Where are you, sweetheart?" "At dance." "Okay, listen to me. You don't need to carry any of this for adults. You hear me?" She sniffed. "Okay." After I hung up, I sat in Ruth's chair and stared at the maple tree until dark. That was when the final piece arrived. Not by mail, by mistake. Eric called my landline just after 9 that night. I picked up too late, and it rolled to the answering machine in the kitchen. Old machine, old tape, old red blinking light. We kept it because Ruth liked hearing people's unprepared voices before they knew they'd been recorded. I was halfway across the room when Eric's voice came through, low and rushed. "Vanessa, he found the Hawthorne thing. Call me back, and tell Melissa not to list anything yet." A pause. Then a second voice, not Vanessa's. A woman I didn't know, sharp, businesslike. "If the capacity letter isn't usable, we can still frame it as a safety issue. But you need him out before the tax lien becomes discoverable in underwriting." Then the line clicked dead. I stood there so long the machine beeped twice for the next message. The next morning, Nora played it 3 times and wrote down the name Melissa. By noon, she had found a Melissa Vance, local realtor, friend of Vanessa's, with listings all over Westfield and Summit. By 2, she had also found a public tax lien filed 6 weeks earlier against Vanessa's event company. And with that, the whole rotten thing stood up in daylight. They weren't simply worried about me being alone. They were underwater. Vanessa's company owed money. Eric had apparently been trying to bridge the gap. My house, fully paid off, well-maintained, in a neighborhood that had gotten expensive while I was busy living in it, had become their cleanest solution. Move me out for safety, gain control under the language of care, sell fast, patch the leak, and call it family management. The mystery was over by then. The worst part had started. Because now I knew 2 things at once: exactly what they wanted, and exactly how far they were willing to go to get it. I thought that knowledge would send me into a rage. Instead, it made me calm. There is a kind of calm that comes when you stop negotiating with the fantasy that someone will suddenly become decent because the stakes are visible enough. Once that fantasy dies, the room gets very quiet. I made coffee. I sharpened a pencil. I sat with Nora at the kitchen table where Ruth used to roll out pie crust on Sundays, and I listened. We locked down the title. We flagged the accounts. Nora drafted a cease and desist letter and a formal notice to Eric that no one had authority to represent my financial or medical interests. We updated my health directives. We moved liquid funds. We added an elder abuse specialist to the consultation list in case the pressure escalated. Then Nora asked, "Do you want to confront him now?" I looked at the brass key I had found 2 days earlier, tucked under the lining of Ruth's sewing box, exactly where she must have hidden it after discovering it was missing from the dish. "No," I said. "I want to know what they do when they think I'm still soft." It turned out I didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, Eric texted me, checking in. "We should revisit our conversation. This adversarial tone isn't good for anyone." "Adversarial tone," I replied. "Not today." Vanessa texted an hour after that. "We're worried about you. Grief can make people suspicious. Please don't shut out the people trying to help." Trying to help. I didn't answer either one. Silence, I learned, can be a form of evidence. Manipulative people rush to fill it. By the end of the week, Eric was calling twice a day. When I finally picked up, he sounded less polished. "Dad, what are you doing?" "Having lunch." "You know what I mean." "Yes," I said. "I do." He exhaled hard. "Nora sent me a letter like I'm some criminal." If that wording bothered you, I said, you could always examine the conduct that inspired it. Jesus Christ. No, I said. He was at the funeral. That silenced him for 2 full seconds. Then his voice changed. Frayed now, angry. You have no idea what pressure I'm under. I almost said, and whose fault is that? But I let him go on. Vanessa's business took a hit. We're carrying too much. I was trying to solve it without panicking you, by planning temporary placement and discussing my capacity. That was precautionary. By missing your mother's funeral. That has nothing to do with the house. I leaned back in Ruth's chair and stared at the dent in the wallpaper where Eric once rammed a toy truck at age 5. It has everything to do with the house, I said. Because both decisions were the same decision. You chose what served you. His breathing came sharp through the line. Then he said something I will never forget. You weren't going to manage alone anyway. Not Dad. Not after some time. Not if you needed us. Weren't going to. Past tense, disguised as future. He had already moved me, in his mind, already reduced me to a problem with furniture. That evening, I made my decision. I invited them over Sunday morning. Not in anger, in writing. Come by at 10. We can discuss the future. Bring whatever you need me to review. Eric answered in under 3 minutes. Thank you. That's all I wanted. No, I thought. It wasn't. What I wanted was simpler. I wanted witnesses. I wanted timing. I wanted the truth to walk far enough into the room that it could no longer pretend it had only stopped by. Nora arranged the rest. She contacted the elder abuse attorney she knew, not to press charges immediately, but to be present and advise if anything crossed into clear criminal conduct. My next-door neighbor Frank, retired deputy sheriff, agreed to sit on his porch that morning with a newspaper and his phone. Nora also asked Lyle from the bank to be on standby in case any document involved financial authorizations. It felt absurd to build a perimeter around a family conversation. Then I remembered the brochure, the missing key, the funeral photo, the bridge loan, and absurdity stopped being my concern. Sunday came bright and cold. Ruth used to call it blue glass weather because the sky looked hard enough to shatter. At 9:20, before Eric and Vanessa were due, Frank texted Nora from next door. Vanessa's friend in a realtor SUV just parked around the corner. At 9:31, a moving van rolled slowly past the house, kept going, then stopped near the church lot at the end of the block. At 9:34, my stomach dropped so fast, I had to grip the sink. They weren't coming to talk. They were coming prepared for possession. Nora saw my face and said, "Good, let them." We took positions the way only ordinary people can when they've been forced into strategy. Nora in the dining room with her files, Frank next door, my phone recording in my shirt pocket, the new camera live over the back door, and me standing in the kitchen beside the porcelain dish that now held the recovered brass key and nothing else. At 9:58, Eric and Vanessa walked up the front path together. Vanessa wore cream trousers and a camel coat, full makeup, gold hoops, the whole polished grief daughter-in-law costume. Eric carried another folder. He looked relieved when he saw only me at first. "Dad," he said, stepping in. "Thank you." Vanessa tilted her head and gave me the expression people use when they've decided gentleness is the most efficient route through resistance. "We're really glad you're ready to be sensible." Sensible. I moved aside and let them in. "Coffee?" I asked. Vanessa blinked, thrown for half a second by the ordinary offer. "No, thank you." Eric set the folder on the table. "This is just a revised version. Cleaner, limited authority, short term, we can get you settled somewhere comfortable while the house is assessed, and then—" "Settled where?" I asked. He hesitated. Vanessa answered, "Hawthorne Glen is very nice." There it was, just like that. The brochure brought to life. The smiling porch swing. The temporary placement. My house discussed like a delayed shipment. I looked at her. "Did you decide that before or after you skipped my wife's funeral for cake?" Eric's face flashed. Vanessa kept hers composed. "This is exactly what I meant," she said softly to him, as if I were not in the room. He's connecting unrelated events emotionally. From the dining room doorway, Nora said, He's connecting them factually. Both of them, jerked around. I will admit this. The sight of Nora stepping in with a legal pad in her hand gave me a satisfaction so pure, it almost felt youthful. Vanessa's expression cracked first. What is she doing here? Nora set a folder on the table. Protecting my client from what appears to be a coordinated attempt to establish false incapacity, force residential displacement, and leverage real property to cover undisclosed debt. Eric recovered faster than Vanessa. This is ridiculous, he said. Dad invited us. I did, I said. I wanted to hear how far the plan had gotten. His jaw hardened. There is no plan. Right on cue, through the front window, a white SUV eased nearer the curb. Melissa, I assumed. The realtor. Behind it, the moving van crawled back into view and parked half a block down. Frank stood up from his porch. Nora noticed too. Interesting traffic pattern for a family wellness check. Vanessa folded her arms. We brought support, in case Thomas agreed to transition today. Thomas. Not Tom. Not Dad. Thomas. People switch to formal names when they need emotional distance from what they're doing. I said, and if I didn't agree? Eric answered too quickly. Then nothing happens. I pulled my phone from my pocket, tapped once, and played the answering machine recording through the speaker. Eric's voice filled the kitchen. He found the Hawthorne thing. Call me back. And tell Melissa not to list anything yet. Then the woman's voice. If the capacity letter isn't usable, we can still frame it as a safety issue. But you need him out before the tax lien becomes discoverable in underwriting. Silence slammed into the room. Even the refrigerator seemed to stop humming. Vanessa turned toward Eric so fast, her earring caught the light like a knife. You saved that? Eric said to me. Not to her, not to himself, to me, as if my preserving evidence were the real betrayal in the room. Nora spoke before I could. We also have the bridge financing worksheet, using this property as a projected collateral event, the draft incapacity language, the missing document packet, witness statements regarding false cognitive claims, and title alerts in place. So this would be an excellent time to decide whether you want to keep talking or start asking for your own counsel. Vanessa's polished voice disappeared then. What came out instead was sharp and ugly. Oh, for God's sake, Eric, I told you to handle him before he got paranoid. Handle him. There are phrases that cleanly divide a life into before and after. That was one of them. I looked at my son. He did not look at me. He looked at the table, at the papers, at the window where the realtor's car sat idling, at the floorboards I had refinished the summer he turned 12. Then he said, Dad, it was not supposed to happen like this. I laughed. I couldn't help it. Short, dry, broken at the edges. You mean, in my kitchen? Instead of behind my back? Vanessa snapped. We are drowning, okay? We needed a solution. Your house is sitting here doing nothing while we are bleeding out. My house is sitting here doing nothing. There it was. The cleanest version. Not memory. Not marriage. Not sacrifice. Not the home where Ruth learned she was pregnant. Where Eric took his first steps gripping the coffee table. Where every pencil mark on the pantry door recorded a child becoming taller under our roof. Just an asset, failing to perform. Frank was at the front step by then. And behind him, because Nora had already called when the moving van appeared, Officer Ramirez from the local department was walking up the path with the steady expression of a man who has seen every version of family shame and none of them surprise him anymore. Eric went pale. Vanessa said, Are you calling the police on us? No, I said. I called them because you brought a mover and a realtor to a conversation. Ramirez entered, listened for less than a minute, then asked the simplest question in the world. Do either of you have permission to remove property from this residence today? Neither answered. He looked at the folder. Do you have signed authority over Mr. Keene's finances, medical decisions, or real property? No, Nora said. And any attempt to represent otherwise would be documented. Vanessa's mask was gone completely now. This is insane. We're family. Ramirez gave her a look so flat, it nearly chilled the room. Ma'am, he said, family is not a legal category for taking control of a competent adult's property. I watched those words land on Eric. Competent adult. Property. Control. Not because I enjoyed his humiliation, though a part of me did by then, because I wanted him to hear his actions translated into plain language, stripped of every excuse he'd wrapped around them. Eric finally looked at me. He looked younger suddenly. Not innocent, just reduced. Like all the borrowed confidence had leaked out of him at once. "I was trying to fix it," he said. "By sacrificing me," I said. His eyes reddened. "I never wanted to hurt you." I thought of Ruth in the hospice bed, saving breath to defend him. I thought of rain on umbrellas at the cemetery while he held a champagne glass. I thought of Sophie whispering from the back seat, asking if I was moving. "Intent," I said quietly, "is the story people tell after impact." Vanessa grabbed her bag. "We're leaving." But the scene wasn't finished with them yet, because Frank, still standing in the doorway, held up something in his big weathered hand. "A brass key. I found this under the front mat by the azaleas," he said. "Guess someone planned for more than one visit." My stomach turned, though by then almost nothing could surprise me. They had hidden a copied key outside my house. Insurance in case the first approach failed. A future entry already planted. Ramirez took the key in a gloved hand and compared it to the new lock plate. "This won't work anymore," he said. Then to Eric, "Do you want to explain why there's an unauthorized key hidden on the property?" Eric said nothing. Vanessa said, "I told Melissa to make a copy weeks ago in case Thomas locked himself out." Thomas again. Always language first, conscience second. Nora wrote that down too. What happened next is the part people expect me to turn into a shout. But I didn't shout. I was done donating volume to people who had mistaken my restraint for weakness. I walked to the porcelain dish by the door. I lifted out the original brass key Ruth had hidden in her sewing box, the one that belonged to this house, to our life, to the version of family that had existed before Appetite put on a wedding ring and moved in. Then I set it on the table between us. "This," I said, "is the last key either of you will ever have to my home." I turned to Eric. "I changed my will Friday." His head snapped up. "Everything that would have gone to you directly now goes into a protected trust for Sophie and Jacob. Educational and medical use first. Distribution at maturity, not through parental control. This house will not rescue your debt. It will not be sold out from under me. And if I choose to leave it, it will go where your mother would have wanted it to go, to children, not to greed dressed as concern." Vanessa made a strangled sound. "You can't do that because you're angry." Nora answered for me. "He can do exactly that because he's competent." Eric looked like he'd been struck. For a second, I saw the boy who used to sleep with toy cars lined in a row on his windowsill. Then I saw the man who had missed his mother's funeral for optics and come to my kitchen with dispossession in a folder. "Dad," he said, voice cracking now, "please." That word might have reached me a month earlier, maybe even a week earlier, but grief has a way of burning illusion down to the studs. "You used your mother's death as a scheduling conflict," I said. "Then you used my grief as a business strategy. Whatever happens to you after this, do not call it something I did." No one spoke. Outside, the moving van pulled away first. Then the realtor's SUV, the whole performance folding up before intermission. Ramirez issued a formal trespass warning. Nora handed Eric notice that any further attempt to access my property, records, or title would trigger immediate legal action. Vanessa left without another word, jaw tight, phone already in hand, probably searching for someone else to blame. Eric stayed 3 seconds longer. He looked around the kitchen as if seeing it for the first time. The worn oak table, the curtain Ruth hemmed herself, the tiny burn mark near the stove where he set down a firecracker when he was 9, and lied about it for a week. "Did Mom know?" he asked. I swallowed. "She knew enough to hide the real key from you." That landed deeper than anything else had. He flinched. Then he walked out. I watched from the window until he got into the passenger seat instead of the driver's. Vanessa pulled away too fast from the curb. That told me plenty about how the ride home was going to sound. The house went quiet. Not empty, quiet. There's a difference. The aftermath came in pieces, but for once, they moved in the right direction. Vanessa's tax lien became public in a way their lenders could no longer sidestep. Eric took a leave from his job before the bank could decide whether his involvement in related financing questions had crossed internal lines. Whether that was shame, strategy, or damage control, I don't know. I didn't ask. Nora kept the file ready, But after the trespass warning and the trust revision, the pressure stopped. That's another truth I learned late. Some people call you unreasonable only until they realize the door is actually closed. Sophie started calling me directly every Sunday evening. At first she talked about school, dance, stupid internet trends I barely understood. Then one night, about a month later, she asked me what her grandmother was like at 17. So I told her about Ruth in a yellow raincoat, laughing on a bus stop bench while I pretended not to stare. I told her how her grandmother could cut a peach over the sink with one hand and balance the church accounts with the other. I told her how she always saved the crispest dollar bills in her wallet to tuck into birthday cards because money should arrive like a blessing, not a receipt. Jacob took longer. Boys sometimes hide pain by becoming efficient. But he came by in June to help me clean the gutters, and halfway up the ladder he said, "Dad was wrong, just that. No speech, no drama. It was enough." As for Eric, he left 2 voicemail messages that summer. The first sounded defensive, the second sounded tired. I wasn't ready for either version. Maybe one day I will be. Forgiveness, if it ever comes, will not be confused with access again. That lesson cost too much. I planted tomatoes where Ruth used to plant them. I had the porch swing repainted the exact faded blue she liked. Not because I believe in preserving grief in amber, but because some colors are part of the oath of a place. Marlene still brings casseroles I don't need. Joan still criticizes my coffee and drinks 2 cups anyway. Life, stubborn as a weed through stone, kept returning. Sometimes people ask what hurt most. Not the documents, not even the plan. It was that phone picture from the cemetery. That instant split screen of my life. My wife being lowered into the ground, my son lifting a glass somewhere warm and bright, smiling like he had chosen correctly. But the image that stayed with me in the end was not that one. It was the brass key. Ruth had hidden it for me when she realized what they were circling. Even dying, she was still protecting the home we built together, not just the wood and plaster, the dignity inside it. Now the key hangs again beside the back door, on the small nail where it lived for 26 years. I don't keep a spare in the dish anymore. Some habits are innocent only once. A few evenings ago, Sophie was leaving after dinner. She stood at the doorway with her backpack slung over one shoulder and touched the key lightly with one finger. "Grandma always kept it there," she said. "She did." She smiled a little. "It looks right." After she left, I locked the door, turned off the kitchen light, and stood for a moment in the blue dark quiet of the house Ruth and I made from paychecks, patience, and faith we once thought was safe in our own blood. The key was back where it belonged. So was I.